I told you I wanted to talk about vision this morning, and I hesitate to do it. It's become almost cliche, the word vision. And everybody has a vision statement from Walmart to Papa John's, but I think it's an important idea, an important subject, because if we don't have a vision, a hope for a future, then it's difficult to make any progress toward a goal. As the leadership guru Stephen Covey once said, we have to begin with the end in mind. And so vision is critical. I thought so much about vision. I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that in my 8,000-mile road trip, I took a detour to see Mount Rushmore. And in the middle of some very, very difficult economic times, somebody had this crazy vision of the 4 presidents on this mountainside. And eventually it came to fruition. But somebody had to start with this mental picture, this vision of what would come to pass. I'll give you another example of a visionary and a vision. Connie and I spent about a month in a little community called Crestone, Colorado. It's at the end of the road, this little tiny town in the Four Corners area, southern Colorado. In fact, some of our members have a daughter who lives there, I found out, Alan Dottie. There's not a lot there. Some old buildings, this beautiful, spectacular setting at the foot of the San Cristo Mountains. But there isn't a lot there. But there is something there that's very, very unique. And it began about 30 years ago with a vision that a wealthy Canadian lady had for this little community of Crestone, Colorado. She had visited Crestone many times, Hannah Strong, and received a kind of a vision that Crestone would become a global village where people could explore spiritual and environmental issues. And so eventually she purchased thousands of acres of land there, and eventually she started giving away the land, 50 and 100 acres at a time, to various religious groups who shared this kind of common vision. And so if you go to Crestone today, you'll not only find the Nada Hermitage, a Carmelite monastery where Connie and I spent over a month, but you'll find Buddhist and Hindu communities, ashrams, meditation centers, a whole smorgasbord of spiritual communities who have kind of located within 5 miles of each other. And it's a very, very special and unique place. And so that vision lives on, but it began with one person who saw something that no one else saw in Crestone, Colorado. Now, I have somewhat of a vision for the church that I've been kind of working out over the course of about 30 years, the church in general, and I'm still working it out. And I think I have kind of a vision for this congregation, which is still in formation, but which I think is becoming more and more in focus for me year after year. And I want to share some of this vision with you in light of our trip to Spain, the Andalusian area, southern Spain. And one of the very unique parts of this part of the world is that for centuries, the Jewish and the Muslim and the Christian faith communities peacefully coexisted. And then after a long turn of events, those communities, especially the Christian and Muslim, went from peaceful coexistence to what I call a conquest and domination model of religion. And if you go to southern Spain, you can see that in very stark relief in the architecture, in the mosque and the cathedrals. You will see literally cathedral built over a mosque, built over a cathedral, and you'll see the architecture, and you'll see the stark contrast of religious faiths. As one conquered the other, Well, eventually the Christian church went out, and they booted out all the Jews, and most of the Muslims but there are still traces of this golden era where Christians and Muslims and Jews lived and worked and worshiped together. And it's quite a unique and beautiful thing to see. But that was the conquest and domination model of religion. And I can't help but thinking in these days that there has to be another way of doing religion and another way of doing church. And so briefly today I'm going to give you 3 images or metaphors of another way of doing religion. First, I want to talk about a circle instead of a dot. I want to talk about a bridge instead of a moat. And I want to talk about a cross instead of a ladder. A circle instead of a dot. What I call theological particularism. It's the idea that true believers, whether they be Christian, Muslim, Jew, or anything else, are only those who fit within my narrow definition of orthodoxy or right belief. And so those who fit within my narrow definition of orthodoxy are true believers, and those who don't fit within it are heretics. And you know what a heretic is? A heretic is someone who disagrees with the views of the majority. That's basically it. And in the Middle Ages, especially in the part of the world we visited, the Christian church did some very, very nasty things to those they considered heretics. It was called the Inquisition, the Question. And one of the little excursions we took was an exhibit, and it's kind of morose, but I did it anyway. Connie really didn't want to do it, and I'm kind of fascinated in my own sick way by this stuff. But the instruments, the tortures of instruments, the instruments of torture they used during the Inquisition. There was a traveling exhibit, and they had all of the apparatus, paraphernalia, the stuff they used to torture people with to extract confessions, or to basically prove they were heretics. And so they had, I don't know where they got this stuff, it was laying around in somebody's garage or something, and they displayed it all, and they actually described in graphic detail how they used the instruments of torture. That was the church. And that went on for a long time. But, the kind of intolerance that illustrates was not confined to the Christian church, and it wasn't confined to the Middle Ages. I mean, it happens today. It's happening right now. I saw an article came out of something happening in Afghanistan. They had just sentenced a young man to death for basically heresy. The Muslims did. And they ended up commuting this sentence, gave him 20 years in prison because they said that he said that Muhammad was kind of hard on women. Well, that happens all the time. In India, right now, there's a movement to basically force Christian believers to convert to Hinduism at the threat of expulsion or even death. It's kind of a turn or burn philosophy. In other words, if you don't take your pictures of Jesus and your Bibles and burn them, we're going to burn your house down. It's happening right now. So the kind of exclusivism and intolerance that we saw then is happening even today. And I have to ask, isn't there another way of doing religion that makes more sense in the kind of world we live in?